It's your birthday, so you'll cook for 40 guests, my mother-in-law smiled. I obeyed until my father walked in.
People often ask me when my marriage started falling apart. They expect me to mention the day my husband stopped saying, "I love you," or the day my mother-in-law moved into our house. Some think it must have been when the arguments became louder than the laughter. The truth is much simpler. My marriage didn't end with one big betrayal. It died 1,000 tiny deaths, one humiliation at a time. And the day I finally stopped pretending everything was okay was my 29th birthday. Ironically, it was also the day I got my life back. My name is Emma Carter, and if you had met me 3 years earlier, you would have called me lucky. I had married Daniel Lawson, a successful real estate broker from one of the wealthiest families in our county. He was charming, confident, and the kind of man who could make an entire room laugh without trying. When he proposed to me on a quiet beach at sunset, I honestly believed I had found the man I would grow old with. Looking back now, I realize I never married Daniel. I married the version of him that only existed when nobody else was watching. Because after our wedding, everything changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, just slowly enough that I kept convincing myself things would get better. Daniel's mother, Margaret Lawson, had a favorite sentence. A good wife serves before she's asked. The first time she said it, I smiled politely. The 10th time, I stayed silent. By the 100th time, I had started believing it. Every family dinner somehow became my responsibility. Every holiday meal, every birthday, every anniversary. If 20 people visited the house, I cooked. If 30 guests arrived unexpectedly, I cooked. If someone forgot dessert, apparently that was my fault too. Daniel never defended me. He never insulted me either. He simply did nothing. Sometimes silence hurts more than cruel words. The week before my birthday, I made one small request. "Can we have dinner together?" Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "Sure. Just us. No guests. No work calls. No family." He smiled absent-mindedly. "Whatever you want." For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe he remembered. Maybe he still cared. My birthday arrived on a Saturday. I woke up smiling. It sounds foolish now, but birthdays always reminded me of my father. When I was little, he used to wake me before sunrise every single year, carrying pancakes shaped like the number of my age. Even when money was tight, even when he worked double shifts, he always found a way to make me feel important. After my parents divorced and Dad moved overseas for work, birthdays became quieter. Still, he never forgot to call. Not once. This year, however, there was no call, no message, nothing. I checked my phone 3 times before finally convincing myself he was probably traveling. Life happens. People get busy. I understood that. Or at least, I tried to. At exactly 8:30 that morning, I walked downstairs expecting Daniel to surprise me. Instead, I found Margaret sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee. She glanced at me for barely a second. "Oh, good. You're awake. Why?" "We have a busy day." Something inside me sank. "What do you mean?" She casually turned another page of her magazine. "I invited 40 guests for dinner." I laughed. She didn't. My smile slowly disappeared. 40? Yes. For tonight. I looked around. "Who's cooking?" She finally looked at me. "You are." For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. "Margaret. Today's my birthday." "I know." She took another sip of coffee. "That's why everyone will already be here." I stared at her. She continued speaking as though discussing the weather. "The chicken should be marinated before noon. The roast goes into the oven around 3. The desserts need at least 4 hours. And don't forget Richard can't eat peanuts." My voice became almost a whisper. "You planned all this? On my birthday?" She folded her magazine and stood. "A birthday is just another day. A wife still has responsibilities." Then she walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, speechless. I immediately called Daniel. He answered after the 4th ring. "Hey, did you know your mom invited 40 people tonight?" "Yeah." My heart dropped. You knew. Of course. Why didn't you tell me? I forgot. You forgot. It's just dinner, Emma. Just dinner. I'll be cooking all day. He sighed. Mom already told everyone. It'd be embarrassing to cancel now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So my birthday doesn't matter? He was quiet for 2 seconds. Then he said something I would never forget. We can celebrate another day. No one's going to remember the date anyway. The call ended. I stood there staring at my phone. Not because he had hung up. Because he genuinely believed he had said nothing wrong. By 10 o'clock, the kitchen looked like a restaurant preparing for a wedding. Vegetables covered the counters. 3 ovens were running. Large pots boiled on every burner. My hands already ached from chopping onions and peeling potatoes. I hadn't eaten breakfast. I hadn't even had coffee. Every few minutes, Margaret walked in, inspected my work, and found something to criticize. The carrots are uneven. The sauce is too thick. You should have started earlier. Not once did she say the words, "Happy birthday." Around noon, the front doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it. A delivery driver smiled warmly. Flower delivery for Emma Carter. For the first time that day, my face lit up. Maybe Daniel hadn't forgotten after all. Maybe this was his surprise. I signed the receipt with shaking hands and opened the small card attached to the bouquet. The smile disappeared. The flowers weren't from Daniel. They weren't from my father. They were from the local bank. Happy birthday. Thank you for being a valued customer. I laughed. Then, without warning, I started crying. Not because of the flowers. Because a bank remembered my birthday. And my own husband didn't. At exactly 5 o'clock, luxury cars began filling the driveway. Guests laughed as they entered the house carrying expensive wine and beautifully wrapped gifts. For a brief, foolish second, I wondered if one of those gifts might actually be for me. Then I heard Margaret's voice echo from the dining room. Emma, the appetizers are late. I quickly wiped my tears, adjusted my apron, and carried the first tray toward the dining room. 40 smiling guests turned to look at me. No one noticed my swollen eyes. No one asked why the birthday girl was wearing an apron instead of a dress. No one wondered why she was serving everyone else instead of celebrating herself. As I placed the final platter on the table, the front door opened once again. Margaret smiled brightly. Oh, perfect. He's finally here. I looked toward the entrance, expecting another guest. Instead, a tall man in a dark gray suit quietly stepped inside carrying an old leather briefcase. The moment our eyes met, time seemed to stop. Dad. He smiled gently. Happy birthday, sweetheart. And for reasons I couldn't explain, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the house, as if he had come to take something back. For a few seconds, the entire house fell silent. The laughter that had filled the dining room faded into an awkward hush as every pair of eyes turned toward the front door. I hadn't seen my father in almost 5 years. Time had added silver to his hair and a few lines around his eyes, but his posture hadn't changed. He still stood the same way he always had, calm, confident, and completely impossible to intimidate. Dad, I whispered again, barely believing he was really standing there. Before I could reach him, Margaret stepped between us with a fake smile she reserved for people she didn't respect. Oh, so you finally decided to visit. My father nodded politely. I wouldn't have missed my daughter's birthday. Margaret laughed softly. How thoughtful. You've already missed the last 4. The room filled with uncomfortable chuckles. She wanted everyone to laugh at him. Dad simply smiled. Sometimes distance is measured in miles. Sometimes it's measured by the people standing between you. Margaret's smile faded for the first time that evening. I wrapped my arms around him without caring who was watching. For the first time all day, I felt safe. He gently kissed my forehead. I'm sorry I'm late. You came. That's enough. He looked at my face for a long moment, then at the flower on my apron, then at the burns on my hands. His smile disappeared. You've been cooking. I forced a laugh. It's just dinner. For 40 people? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He already knew. Daniel finally walked over with a glass of wine in his hand. Mr. Carter. He offered a handshake. My father looked at his hand, but didn't take it. Instead, he asked one quiet question. Did you wish my daughter a happy birthday? Daniel blinked. The silence answered for him. Dad nodded once. I thought so. Without another word, he walked past him and placed a neatly wrapped gift on the dining table. It was small, simple, wrapped in brown paper instead of expensive gold ribbon. Compared to the luxury gifts covering the room, it looked almost insignificant. Margaret smirked. Well, I suppose it's the thought that counts. Dad smiled politely. I agree. Dinner officially began. Or at least, everyone else began eating. I remained in the kitchen, serving drinks, refilling plates, carrying desserts. Every time I sat down, someone called my name. Emma, we're out of bread. Emma, more ice. Emma, coffee. Emma, could you warm this? By the time dessert was served, I hadn't eaten a single bite. Not one person noticed. Except my father. From across the room, I caught him watching me. Not with anger. With disappointment. The kind that hurts far more. Then came the toast. Daniel stood, raised his wine glass, and smiled at everyone. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Everyone applauded. He thanked his mother, his uncle, his business partners, his neighbors, even the chef from a nearby restaurant who had dropped off extra desserts. Finally, he sat down. Nothing else. No mention of my birthday. No mention of me. The applause slowly faded. My father calmly stood. If no one minds, I'd like to make a toast. Margaret rolled her eyes. Of course. Dad lifted his glass of water. I'd like everyone here to remember something. He looked around the room. Tonight isn't a dinner party. It's my daughter's birthday. Silence. Several guests looked at each other in embarrassment. One elderly woman whispered, I had no idea. Another guest slowly put down his fork. My father continued, while all of you have been enjoying your meals, my daughter has spent the last 10 hours cooking every dish on this table. No one spoke. Not even Margaret. Dad smiled sadly. So before anyone thanks the hosts, perhaps someone should thank the woman who made tonight possible. For the first time all evening, a few guests began clapping. Then more joined. Within seconds, almost the entire room applauded. I felt tears filling my eyes. Not because of the applause. Because someone had finally seen me. Margaret wasn't happy. She forced another smile. Emma enjoys taking care of her family. Dad looked at her. Does she? Of course. He nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps tonight, someone else should take care of her. Without waiting for permission, he walked into the kitchen. 5 minutes later, he returned carrying a dinner plate. He placed it in front of me, then gently pulled out the chair beside him. Sit. I still have dishes. They can wait. But they've waited 29 years to appreciate you. They can wait another 20 minutes. I sat down. My hands trembled as I picked up the fork. It was the first warm meal I'd eaten all day. The atmosphere had completely changed. Guests who had spent hours praising Margaret's hospitality now looked uncomfortable. Several quietly thanked me for the food. One woman even apologized. I thought your mother-in-law hired caterers. I smiled weakly. I guess not. Across the table, Daniel avoided looking at me. For the first time since we'd married, he looked ashamed. But shame without action changes nothing. As dinner came to an end, Margaret clapped her hands. Now, it's time for cake. I smiled despite everything. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a surprise. The lights dimmed. The kitchen door opened. A large 3-tier cake rolled into the dining room. Beautiful, elegant, covered in white roses. My heart raced. Then Margaret spoke. Congratulations, Richard and Susan. On your 30th wedding anniversary. The room erupted into applause. I stared at the cake. It wasn't for me. Not a single candle. Not my name. Nothing. Richard and Susan smiled happily as they cut the first slice. Someone began singing. Not "Happy Birthday," but an anniversary song. At that moment, something inside me quietly broke. Dad looked at me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He had seen enough. He slowly stood up, picked up his old leather briefcase, walked to the center of the dining room, and placed it on the table with a firm thud. Every conversation stopped. Margaret frowned. "What is that?" My father calmly opened the briefcase, removed a thick blue folder, then looked directly at Daniel, before saying the words that would change everyone's lives. "I've spent 5 years waiting for tonight, and now, it's finally time to discuss who really owns this house." The room fell into complete silence. Even the children stopped talking. 40 guests sat frozen around the dining table, their attention fixed on the blue folder resting beneath my father's hand. Margaret laughed first. A loud, dismissive laugh. "Oh, Robert, you always did enjoy making dramatic entrances." She leaned back confidently. "But this isn't the time for jokes." My father didn't smile. "I agree. This isn't a joke." Daniel finally stood. "Mr. Carter, I think there's been some misunderstanding." Dad slowly turned toward him. "I hope there has. Because if there hasn't, your entire family has been living a lie." A murmur spread through the room. People exchanged nervous glances. Richard quietly whispered to his wife. "What is he talking about?" No one knew. Except Margaret. For the first time all evening, the color drained from her face. Dad calmly opened the folder. Inside were dozens of documents. Property records, bank transfers, legal agreements, each one protected inside transparent sleeves. He removed the first document and placed it in the middle of the table. "I recognize that," Daniel said. "You should. It's your home's original purchase agreement." Daniel looked confused. "My father bought this house." Dad shook his head. "No, he didn't." Margaret interrupted sharply. "That's ridiculous. We've lived here for almost 30 years. I know, but living somewhere and owning it aren't always the same thing." Several guests leaned closer. Even those who had been checking their phones were now paying attention. Dad pointed to the first page. "This property was purchased 29 years ago." He slid another document beside it. "The money came from Carter Development Holdings." My surname. Not Lawson. Carter. I frowned. "Dad, what is this?" He looked at me gently. "Something I should have told you years ago." Daniel picked up the document. His expression slowly changed. This can't be right. The signatures are real. So are the bank records." Margaret quickly snatched the papers from his hands. She skimmed through them before slamming them back onto the table. "Forgery." Dad smiled. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." He reached into the briefcase again. This time, he removed an official envelope bearing the county seal. "I invited someone." The front door opened. A middle-aged man wearing a navy suit walked inside. Every guest turned. Margaret's confidence vanished completely. "Mr. Jenkins?" The man nodded politely. "Good evening." Daniel looked confused. "You know him?" Margaret didn't answer. Mr. Jenkins placed a leather portfolio on the table. "I've served as this family's property attorney for 31 years. The room became so quiet that I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. He opened the portfolio. "I believe it's time everyone learns the truth." He spread several certified copies across the table. One carried a gold government seal. Another contained the original deed. My eyes widened as I read the owner's name. Robert Carter. My father. Not Daniel's parents. Not the Lawson family. My father. I looked up in disbelief. "Dad, you own this house?" He nodded once. "I always have." Gasps echoed around the room. Daniel stared at his mother. "Mom, what is this?" Margaret's hands began to shake. It's complicated." Dad answered instead. "No, it's actually very simple." He looked around the dining room before continuing. 29 years ago, Margaret and her late husband lost everything. The bank was about to repossess this property. Several guests looked shocked. I helped them. I paid every debt. I bought this house. And I allowed them to stay here. Daniel whispered. Why? Because your father was my best friend. The room fell silent again. Dad continued. We signed a private occupancy agreement. They could live here until the remaining balance was repaid. He paused. They never paid a single dollar. Margaret finally exploded. Because you said we were family. I said I'd help family. I never agreed to be used by family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For years, Margaret had acted as though she owned everything. She constantly reminded me, this is my house, my rules, my kitchen. Now, none of it had ever belonged to her. I slowly turned toward Daniel. You knew. His eyes filled with panic. I swear, I didn't. I thought Dad inherited it. He looked genuinely shocked. For the first time that night, I believed him. Margaret suddenly stood. This is blackmail. Dad calmly folded his hands. No, this is accounting. He slid one final document across the table. Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat. As of last month, the occupancy agreement officially expired. He looked directly at Margaret. Legally, Mr. Carter now has full possession of the property. Daniel whispered. What does that mean? The lawyer answered without emotion. It means everyone currently living here must vacate the property. The room erupted. What? That's impossible. You can't do this. Margaret slammed both hands onto the table. You waited until Emma's birthday? Dad looked at her without blinking. No. I waited until the day you finally showed my daughter exactly who you are. Margaret had no answer. Not one. She simply stood there, speechless. Then Dad reached into his briefcase one last time. He pulled out a sealed white envelope. He placed it in front of Margaret. She looked at it, then at him. Her hands trembled. What is this? Dad's voice was calm. An official eviction notice. You have 30 days to leave my house. For a long moment, no one moved. The eviction notice lay on the table like a ticking bomb. Margaret stared at it without touching it, as though opening the envelope would somehow make it real. Finally, she laughed. It wasn't the confident laugh she'd worn all evening. It was desperate. This is ridiculous. She looked around the room, expecting someone to support her. No one did. Several guests quietly lowered their eyes. Others suddenly became very interested in their empty plates. The same people who had praised Margaret's beautiful home only minutes earlier now looked as if they wanted to disappear. Daniel slowly picked up the envelope. His hands shook as he broke the seal. Inside was a professionally prepared legal notice. He read the first page, then the second. The color drained from his face. He looked at his mother. It's real. Margaret snatched the papers from him. No, there has to be some mistake. She flipped through every page. Every signature was notarized. Every date was official. Every document carried the county seal. There was no mistake. Only the truth. She suddenly pointed at my father. You planned this. Dad nodded once. Yes. You wanted to humiliate me. No. He looked directly into her eyes. You did that yourself. The sentence hit harder than a slap. Even the guests who had been whispering fell silent. Margaret wasn't finished. She turned toward me. This is your fault. You brought him here. I blinked in disbelief. I didn't even know he was coming. Liar. She stepped toward me, her voice rising. You've been plotting against this family from the beginning. Before I could answer, my father calmly stepped between us. Be careful. Margaret glared at him. Or what? Dad's voice remained perfectly calm. Or you'll regret your next sentence. For the first time that night, Margaret took a step back. Daniel ran both hands through his hair. Mom, tell me the truth. She looked away. Did Dad know? No. So Dad never owned this house? Silence. Daniel's breathing became heavier. You told me my entire life that Grandpa built this house for us. She still said nothing. His voice cracked. You lied to me? Tears finally filled Margaret's eyes. I did what I had to do. Daniel closed his eyes. Everything he believed about his childhood collapsed in a single evening. One of the guests quietly stood up. Then another. Within minutes, people began collecting their coats. No one wanted to remain in a house that had just become the center of a family scandal. As they passed me, several stopped. "I'm sorry, Emma. I didn't know. You deserved better." One elderly woman hugged me tightly. "I should have realized. I watched you serving everyone while no one served you." I smiled through tears. "Thank you." Within 15 minutes, the dining room that had been full of laughter was almost empty. Only family remained. The silence became unbearable. Then, my father walked into the kitchen. He looked around slowly. Every counter was covered with dirty dishes. Pots, pans, serving trays. Evidence of 10 exhausting hours of work. He turned toward Daniel. "Who cleaned all this before Emma married you?" Daniel swallowed hard. "My mom." "And after Emma married you?" He looked at the floor. "Emma." Dad nodded. "I thought so." He walked to the sink, rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, and quietly began washing the dishes. I stared at him. "Dad." He smiled gently. "Sit down. You've worked enough today." At 29 years old, for the first time in my marriage, someone told me to rest. Daniel slowly approached me. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. He had said those words before. After every argument. After every disappointment. After every broken promise. This time, they felt empty. "I forgot your birthday." "I'm sorry." "I let Mom treat you badly." "I'm sorry." "I should have protected you." "I'm sorry." He reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "You know what's strange?" He looked at me hopefully. "What?" "I believe you're sorry." His face brightened. Then I finished my sentence. "I just don't think you're sorry enough." His expression fell. Margaret suddenly burst into tears. Real tears. Not the dramatic kind she'd used to manipulate people for years. These were different. She walked toward my father. "Robert, I'm asking you, please, don't take her home." Dad stopped washing the dishes. He dried his hands slowly with a towel, then turned to face her. "Our home," he repeated the words quietly. "When Emma cried alone in this kitchen, was she family?" Margaret looked down. "When you made her cook for 40 people on her birthday, was this her home?" Silence. "When Daniel forgot her birthday, did you remind him?" "Nothing." "When you called this?" He gestured around the kitchen. "Your house. Your rules. Did you ever stop to remember whose house it really was?" Margaret couldn't answer a single question. Dad walked back into the dining room. He picked up the small birthday gift he'd brought earlier. The simple brown package. He handed it to me. "I think it's finally time." With trembling hands, I untied the ribbon. Inside was an old photo album. On the first page, a picture of me sitting on Dad's shoulders at 6 years old. The next page, every birthday, every school play, every dance recital, even the birthdays he had missed. There were photographs I'd never seen before. Pictures friends had secretly sent him. Teachers. Neighbors. He had never stopped following my life. Even from another country. Tucked inside the final page was a handwritten note. "Distance kept me away. It never stopped me from being your father." I couldn't hold back anymore. I broke down in tears and hugged him. He held me tightly, then whispered, "I'm sorry it took me so long to come home." At that exact moment, the front doorbell rang. Everyone turned. Mr. Jenkins, the attorney, walked back inside. His expression was serious. "Mr. Carter, I've just received an urgent phone call." Dad frowned. "What happened?" The lawyer looked toward Daniel, then toward Margaret. "I'm afraid this house isn't the only thing they're about to lose." The room went silent again. I had never seen Mr. Jenkins look nervous before. He was the kind of lawyer who spoke calmly even in courtrooms, but now his face was unusually tense. My father stepped forward. "What happened?" Mr. Jenkins placed another folder on the dining table. "This arrived from the bank less than 10 minutes ago." Daniel frowned. "The bank?" Mr. Jenkins nodded. "They've frozen every business account belonging to Lawson Realty." Daniel's eyes widened. "What?" That's impossible. I talked to the accountant yesterday. The company was fine. Mr. Jenkins looked at him sympathetically. It was. Yesterday. Margaret grabbed the papers. This has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with you, Mr. Jenkins replied. He opened the first page. For the last 6 years, Lawson Realty has been operating at a loss. Daniel looked stunned. No. We closed several million-dollar deals this year. We did. But none of the profits stayed in the company. He pointed to a long list of transactions. Luxury vacations. Designer jewelry. Private club memberships. New vehicles. Cash withdrawals. Daniel slowly turned toward his mother. Mom. Margaret avoided his eyes. You handled the finances. Daniel's voice had become almost a whisper. I trusted you. Margaret folded her arms. I did what was necessary. For what? To maintain our reputation. Daniel laughed bitterly. Our reputation? We're bankrupt. Mr. Jenkins quietly corrected him. No, you're worse than bankrupt. He slid another document across the table. The company owes almost $4.8 million. I covered my mouth. Daniel looked as though someone had punched him. I don't understand. Mr. Jenkins sighed. Someone has been taking loans against future commissions. Daniel frowned. I never approved any loans. No, you didn't. Everyone slowly looked at Margaret. She closed her eyes. I signed them. Daniel staggered backward. You forged my signature? I was protecting this family. You destroyed this family. The silence that followed was deafening. For years, Margaret had acted like the perfect matriarch. The woman who claimed to know everything. Who criticized everyone. Who constantly reminded me how lucky I was to marry into the Lawson family. Now, there was almost nothing left of that image. Only fear. My father looked at Daniel for a long moment. I owe you an apology. Daniel looked confused. Why? I thought you were just like your mother. He paused. I was wrong. Daniel lowered his head. I should have protected Emma. You should have. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. For the first time since I'd met Daniel, I saw him cry. Not because he was losing the house. Not because he was losing money. But because he realized he had spent years watching me suffer. Without saying a word. He looked at me. I became the kind of husband I promised I'd never become. I didn't answer. Some truths don't need a response. Mr. Jenkins checked his phone. There's one more issue. Margaret looked exhausted. What now? The bank intends to investigate every financial transfer made during the last 6 years. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? It means, if fraud is proven. He looked directly at Margaret. Criminal charges are possible. Margaret's knees almost gave way. She collapsed into a chair. No, I never meant. My father interrupted quietly. Intent doesn't erase consequences. The house felt completely different now. Just a few hours earlier, it had been filled with music, laughter, and expensive wine. Now, only silence remained. I walked into the kitchen. The birthday cake from Richard and Susan's anniversary still sat untouched on the counter. I stared at it for a few seconds, then quietly closed the box. Some memories weren't worth keeping. As I turned around, Dad was standing behind me. You okay? I smiled weakly. I don't know. He nodded. That's an honest answer. He handed me a small envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside was a key. Old. Silver. Attached to it was a handwritten label. Lakeview Cottage. I looked up. Our old cabin? Dad smiled. I bought it back. Tears filled my eyes. You did. I thought. Maybe it's time you had a place that actually feels like home. For the first time in years. The future didn't seem frightening. It felt possible. Just then, Daniel walked into the kitchen. His eyes were red. I've packed a bag. I looked at him silently. I'm leaving tonight. Dad says he'll stay with a friend. I nodded. I think that's best. He took a deep breath. I won't ask you to stay. I won't ask for another chance. He swallowed hard. I only wanted to say, Happy birthday, Emma. The words came 12 hours late. And somehow, that made them hurt even more. He placed a small velvet box on the counter, then quietly walked away. I never opened it, because some gifts arrive after they've already lost their value. Outside, rain began falling. I stood on the porch beside my father. The driveway that had been filled with luxury cars a few hours earlier was now empty. He looked at the house one last time. You know, I never came here to take revenge. I looked at him. Then why did you come? He smiled. I came to remind my daughter that she should never confuse love with sacrifice. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Behind us, the lights inside the Lawson house slowly went out, one room after another. And for the first time since I married Daniel, I realized something. I hadn't lost a home. I had escaped a prison. 3 days later, the Lawson house no longer looked like the place where I had spent the last 3 years pretending to be happy. Moving trucks lined the driveway. Cardboard boxes covered the front lawn. Furniture that Margaret had once proudly called family treasures now sat wrapped in plastic, waiting to be loaded onto a truck. Neighbors slowed their cars as they passed. Some whispered. Some stared openly. News traveled fast in our town, especially when one of its wealthiest families fell from grace. I didn't come to watch them leave. I came for one reason only. The last of my belongings. My father insisted on coming with me. You don't have to do this alone. I know. And this time, you won't. For years, I had carried every burden by myself. It felt strange having someone beside me. Strange, but comforting. Daniel opened the front door. He looked different. The expensive suits were gone. His designer watch had disappeared. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since my birthday. Hi. His voice was quiet. Hi. He stepped aside. You can take whatever you want. I walked past him. For the first time, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a museum filled with memories I no longer wanted. Upstairs, I entered the bedroom. My closet was exactly as I'd left it. Half the shelves were empty. Dad. He walked into the room. What is it? I handed him the notebook. He quietly read a few pages, then sighed. They didn't marry you. They hired you. His words hurt because they were true. As we carried the final box downstairs, Margaret appeared in the hallway. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago. No makeup. No expensive jewelry. No confidence. Only regret. Emma. I stopped walking. She hesitated before speaking. I owe you an apology. I waited. For everything. The way I treated you. The things I said. I was wrong. There it was. The apology I'd imagined hearing 100 times. The problem was, it came too late. I accept your apology. Hope appeared in her eyes. Then I finished my sentence. But I don't forgive you. Her shoulders dropped. You don't have to. I know. She slowly walked toward me. I was jealous. I frowned. Jealous. You loved this family. More than I ever did. The confession stunned me. I spent years trying to control everyone because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Being alone. She looked around the empty house. I guess I made that happen anyway. For the first time. I almost pitied her. Almost. Outside, movers carried another couch into the truck. Daniel joined us on the porch. The divorce papers. He swallowed. I've already signed them. I nodded. I'll sign them tomorrow. No lawyers. No arguments. No fighting. I don't want anything from you. He forced a sad smile. You already gave me more chances than I deserved. He reached into his pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. What's this? The reservation. I looked confused. The restaurant. Our birthday dinner. I actually booked it. My eyebrows rose. The morning of your birthday. I was going to surprise you. I looked at the receipt. The reservation time. 7:30 p.m. The same time Margaret invited 40 guests. He laughed bitterly. I canceled it. Why? He looked at his mother. Because saying no to her always seemed harder than disappointing you. Those words explained our entire marriage. My father stepped forward. Daniel. He looked up. If you really regret what happened, then don't spend the rest of your life apologizing. Spend it becoming a better man. Daniel nodded slowly. I will. I hope so. As we loaded the last box into Dad's SUV, a black luxury car stopped across the street. A woman stepped out. She looked to be in her early 50s. Elegant. Confident. She walked directly toward my father. Robert. He smiled. Claire. She hugged him warmly. I looked between them. Dad. He smiled sheepishly. I was going to tell you. Claire laughed. I told him not to. She extended her hand. I'm Claire Jenkins. I blinked. Jenkins. She smiled. I'm Michael Jenkins' sister. Then she looked at my father. And I've been trying to convince this stubborn man to marry me for the last 2 years. I stared at Dad. He actually looked embarrassed. I couldn't remember ever seeing that. Claire smiled at me. I think it's finally time he stopped living for everyone else. I looked at Dad. He shrugged. What can I say? Your father isn't as old as he looks. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from relief, not politeness. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The Lawson house grew smaller and smaller, until it disappeared completely. And with it, so did the woman I used to be. A month later, the divorce was finalized. No courtroom drama. No screaming. No fight over money. Daniel signed the papers. I signed the papers. The judge looked at both of us and quietly said, I hope you both find peace. Daniel nodded. I nodded too. But deep inside, I wasn't looking for peace anymore. I was looking for a new beginning. I moved into the Lakeview cottage with my father. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have marble floors or crystal chandeliers. The roof creaked whenever it rained. The wooden porch needed repairs. The kitchen was smaller than the one I'd left behind. Yet somehow, it felt warmer than any house I'd ever lived in. Because for the first time, nobody expected me to earn my place there. I already belonged. One Saturday morning, Dad found me in the kitchen making pancakes. He smiled. I think you're stealing my tradition. I laughed. I learned from the best. He sat down with 2 mugs of coffee. What are you going to do now? I've been thinking. Dangerous. Very. He smiled. So, I don't want to go back to accounting. You don't. I shook my head. For years, I organized everyone's life except my own. I want to open something. Dad looked curious. A business. I nodded. A bakery. His face lit up. You've always loved baking. I stopped because everyone turned it into work. I want to remember why I loved it. He raised his coffee mug. Then let's build a bakery. 3 months later, Emma's table opened on the corner of Maple Street. It wasn't fancy. Just 12 tables. Fresh bread. Homemade pies. Birthday cakes. And a promise printed on every menu. No one should work on their birthday. Customers loved it. Not because the food was perfect, but because the place felt like home. Within 6 months, we had to hire 3 more employees. Then 5. Then 8. People traveled from neighboring towns just to eat breakfast there. For the first time in my life, success felt peaceful. One rainy afternoon, the bell above the bakery door rang. I looked up. Daniel. He stood quietly near the entrance. He looked healthier than the last time I'd seen him. Less expensive. More honest. Can I come in? It's a bakery. I smiled politely. We usually allow customers. He laughed softly. I deserved that. He ordered coffee. Nothing else. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he slid a newspaper across the table. The headline caught my attention. Former Lawson Realty manager starts non-profit housing program. I looked at him. You. He nodded. I sold everything I had left. I started helping families who are about to lose their homes. I looked surprised. Why? He smiled sadly. Because I finally understand what a home actually is. For the first time. I believed him. Not because he said the right words. Because his actions finally matched them. As he stood to leave, he stopped beside the door. I don't expect forgiveness. I know. I just wanted you to know. You saved me. I frowned. I divorced you. You saved me from becoming my mother. Then he quietly walked away. I watched through the window until he disappeared into the rain. Some people come into your life to stay. Others come to teach you who you never want to become. Daniel had done both. That evening, the bakery was full. Families laughed together. Children argued over cupcakes. An elderly couple shared a slice of apple pie. I walked through the dining room smiling. This was the life I'd always wanted. Not luxury, not status, just peace. Just before closing time, Dad walked in carrying a bouquet of flowers. I laughed. Dad, my birthday isn't until next year. I know. He handed me the flowers anyway. I figured I'd start celebrating early. I hugged him tightly. Thank you. For what? For reminding me that I deserved better. He smiled. No, I only reminded you. You were the one brave enough to believe it. As we locked the bakery doors, I noticed a young woman sitting alone on the bench across the street. She couldn't have been older than 25. She was crying quietly. I walked over. Are you okay? She quickly wiped her tears. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother anyone. What happened? She hesitated, then whispered. My husband's family says I'm only useful if I cook and clean. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, it felt like I was looking at my younger self. I smiled gently. Come inside. We're closed. I know, but I think it's your birthday too. Her eyes widened. How did you know? I smiled. Because I remember exactly what that kind of sadness looks like. I unlocked the bakery door, turned on the lights, and cut the biggest slice of chocolate cake we had. Because someone had once reminded me that every birthday deserves to be celebrated. 1 year later, the bakery looked nothing like it had on opening day. What had started as a tiny corner shop with 12 tables had grown into the busiest bakery in town. On weekends, people lined up outside before sunrise. Some came for the cinnamon rolls, some for the birthday cakes, but most came because they had heard the story. The story of the woman who had been treated like a servant in her own home, and turned her pain into a place where everyone felt valued. Above the counter hung a small wooden sign that every customer noticed. No one leaves here feeling forgotten. Every time I looked at those words, I remembered the birthday I had cried over a bouquet from a bank because it was the only place that remembered my special day. That memory still hurt, but it no longer controlled me. My father had become the unofficial manager of the bakery. He insisted he was retired, yet somehow he was always the first person to unlock the doors every morning. He greeted every customer by name. He carried flour sacks even when I told him not to. And every Friday afternoon, he baked pancakes for the neighborhood children, just like he had once done for me. One evening, I asked him, Dad, do you ever regret buying that house for the Lawsons? He smiled thoughtfully before answering. I regret trusting the wrong people. Then he looked around the bakery. But if I hadn't, I might never have realized how strong my daughter really was. A week before my 30th birthday, something unexpected happened. A black SUV stopped outside the bakery. For a brief moment, old memories rushed back. Then Daniel stepped out. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a family of 4, a young couple with 2 small children. The little boy carried a homemade birthday card. Daniel walked inside. I hope this isn't a bad time. It's not. He smiled and stepped aside. I want you to meet someone. The young father extended his hand. My name is Chris. My family was about to lose our home 6 months ago. I looked confused. He continued. Daniel's housing program helped us. He paid our legal fees. He negotiated with the bank. He even found me a new job. His wife smiled through tears. If it wasn't for him, our kids would have been homeless. Daniel looked embarrassed. I only did what I should have been doing years ago. For the first time since our divorce, I saw a man who had truly changed. Not because life had punished him, but because he had chosen to become better. The day before my birthday, the local newspaper arrived for an interview. The reporter looked around the bakery before asking, "Everyone knows the story about your marriage. But if you could say one thing to women who feel trapped, what would it be?" I thought about the question for a long moment, then smiled. Don't wait for people to value you. Value yourself first. Because the moment you realize your worth, the people who took you for granted lose their power. The reporter lowered her notebook. I think that's going to inspire a lot of people. I hope so. Finally, my 30th birthday arrived. I woke up to the smell of pancakes. I laughed before I even opened my eyes. Some traditions are too precious to lose. When I walked downstairs, the bakery lights were already on. Dad stood in the kitchen wearing a ridiculous birthday hat. "You still make pancakes shaped like numbers?" He grinned. I had 30 years of practice. Before I could answer, the front door opened. Then another. And another. Within minutes, the bakery filled with people. Neighbors. Friends. Employees. Customers. The young woman I had helped months earlier. Even Chris and his family. Everyone held flowers. Everyone smiled. No one expected me to serve them. Instead, they had come to celebrate me. I looked around the room, overwhelmed. This is too much. Dad shook his head. No. He placed a birthday cake on the table. This is what family is supposed to feel like. The room erupted into applause as everyone began singing Happy Birthday. Halfway through the song, I started crying. Not because I was sad, because I finally understood something. The greatest gift my father had given me wasn't the deed to a house. It was the courage to walk away from a place where I was never truly loved. The house had simply been the door. Freedom was what waited on the other side. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I locked the bakery and stood outside beneath the fading sunset. Dad joined me. "So, any birthday wishes?" I smiled. "I already got mine." He looked curious. "What was it?" I glanced through the bakery window, where laughter still seemed to echo in the empty room. "A year ago, they made me cook for 40 guests on my birthday. I thought they had taken everything from me." I looked at my father. "But losing that house helped me find a home." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Together, we watched the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the trees. And for the first time in many years, tomorrow didn't frighten me. It excited me. Because I had learned the lesson that changed my life forever. The people who make you feel small are never your family. The people who remind you how valuable you are always will be.